Good day, learners. Welcome to Technical Mathematics lesson. My name is Matule Latakomu. This lesson is brought to you by Sci-Bono Discovery Center in collaboration with Gauteng Department of Education. Welcome back, learners. Today's topic is equations. And without any waste of time, let's go to our lesson objectives. At the end of this lesson, learners must be able to deal with quadratic equation written in standard form. They have to know how to factorize quadratic equations and how to apply or use the zero factor method and use the quadratic formula. So those are the things that we will be looking at in today's lesson. Let's look at quadratic equations. There are steps to follow when we're solving quadratic equations, especially when we have to factorize. So we have the first step there where it says write the equation in a standard form. And remember, when you write the equation in a standard form, your equation must be in a form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So now, every time when you solve, you must make sure that your equation is in the standard form. That is your first step that you need to take. The second step, we have to factorize. And remember, by factorizing, you have to open the two brackets depending on how many terms you have. Correct? Then the third step, step number 3, we have to equate each factor inside the bracket to 0. That's when we apply what we call our zero factor rule. And step number 4, you must solve your linear equations from your factors that you have found in step number 3. Then you have to write your solutions in the form of x is equal to root 1 and x is equal to root 2. So those are the 5 basic steps that we are going to be looking at today when we're solving quadratic equations by factorizations. Okay, let's look at one examples of what I mean. You can see that they are given an equation as x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. Then the first thing that we need to do is to factorize because the equation is in the standard form. Remember, we said the equation have to be in a form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Then we can say equation is in a standard form. So the first step there, it's a tick because the equation is in the standard form. But now we have to know how to factorize. And in order for us to factorize, remember you have to open your two brackets. After opening two brackets, then that's where you start to factorize. Then how do we factorize? Your leading term there, which is x squared, it tells us that our equation or our solutions, they must have 2 x values. That's where now we have our x squared there. Then as you factorize, you know that the leading coefficient, it will be shared into two brackets there, sx and x, knowing very well that when we multiply them, they are going to take us back to x squared. Then now, how do we deal with term 2 and term 3 in terms of factorization? After separating your x variables, you look at the last term. You check what is the value of the last term, and you find that the value of the last term there is 2. Then how do we deal with that? We're saying we need the factors. By me saying factors, I'm talking about the numbers that when we multiply, they give us 2. The two numbers that when we multiply, they give us 2. But when we add or subtract them, they must give us the middle term, which is 3. And the only numbers that when you can multiply and give you 2, it's 2 and 1. It's 1 and 2. 1 and 2, when you multiply them, they give you 2. And when you add 1 and 2, they give you 3, which is our middle term. Then we can use the factors of 1 and 2 to factorize our equation there. Then you will put 1 and put 2 into our brackets. then you have to decide on the signs. Which signs am I going to put inside the bracket to make my factorization correct? But with this one, it's very simple because our signs are always all positive. So you don't have to sweat. You will only put positive and positive inside the brackets. So that is the second step of factorization. After factorization, now we go to the third step. Third step, it says we must equate each factor inside the bracket to 0, of which we have equated the factors equal to 0. Correct? Then from there, you must solve. That is the fourth step. You must solve these linear equations. By solving these linear equations, it means I will transpose this positive 1 to the right-hand side, and I transpose this positive 2 to the right-hand side. And you know that when you transpose a positive number, when it jumps or it crosses the equal signs, it will change the sign from positive to negative, from positive to negative. So that's where now you have done all the steps and you are arriving at step number 5. So this is an example of what is it that is going to happen in our lesson today. So this is the questions that you need to ask yourself whenever you are dealing with quadratic equations. As you are following your steps, then you have to ask your questions, this type of questions. Does equation equal to 0? That is the question that you need to ask yourself. If the equation is not equal to 0, then the equation is not in a standard form. Then you can look at this, that x squared minus 3x plus 1, it is equal to 0, then the equation is in a standard form. And 3x squared plus 6x is equal to negative 5. You can see that that is not in the standard form. It means I can't start to factorize or apply any form of solving that equation. So if ever it is not in a standard form, you need to convert it first to a standard form. And if ever it is on a standard form, then the equation is ready to solve. So those are the questions that you need to ask yourself before you look into or you factorize and get your factors and get your solutions. Those are the few things that you need to look at. Correct? Then now, let's look at our activity number 1. We have 5 sub-questions there from activity number 1, and all of them are in a form of your quadratic equations. Then we need to solve for x. Then activity number 1 is there with 5 sub-questions. Without any waste of time, let's look at our first question. So with the first question there, 1.1, we have a negative 5x squared is equal to 4x. Then remember, here we need to solve for x. And before we can even solve for x, we need to apply our methods of the steps that we spoke about. Then now you can see that it's not in a standard form. For us to put it in a standard form, we must firstly transpose this negative 4 to the left-hand side. As we transpose it, it will be negative 5x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. You know that when you transpose a positive number or a positive variable to either left or right, it will change the sign. Then from there, you look into your equations and you have to ask yourself, what type of factorization is going to be there? We have 2 terms which is binomial, and in each term we have the variable of x, of which we can solve it by taking out the common factor, and the common factor there is x. So we are going to say x, then we open the bracket as 5x minus 4 is equal to 0. And remember, after factorization, you need to at least check your factorization if you have done it correctly. By me saying you have done it correctly, it means if you were to multiply by this x inside the bracket, you must go back to the equation there. Correct? So now we know that if we multiply x with negative 5x, you are going to get negative 5x squared. And if we multiply x with negative 4, you are going to get negative 4x, of which we have done the correct factorization there. Then now, at this step after factorization, the step 3 is to apply the zero factor rule. Zero factor rule, it means you will say, therefore, x will be equal to 0, or what is inside the bracket now is minus 5x minus 4, that is equal to 0. Then we need to solve our linear equations. You will take negative 4 and transpose it to your right hand side. Then we'll have negative 5x is equal to, it will change the sign to what? To positive. So now you have negative 5x is equal to 4. And the question says x must be the subject of the formula as we are solving for x. Then I need to get rid of this negative 5. Multiplication goes hand in hand with division. We can't transpose negative 5, but we can only divide both sides by negative 5. As we divide, then your negative 5 and negative 5 will cancel out. Therefore, now your x, it will be negative 4 over 5. So that's how you follow your steps step by step, from step 1 to step 5. Then you are done with factorization there. Out again. Moving forward, we're looking at this question 1.2. Looking at this question, learners, remember they said your equation, it must be equal to 0. But now our equation now is given in a form of 2 factors inside the bracket. Out again. Then now, if ever you have factors inside the bracket and your equation is equal to 0, it means already this question is in step number 2, where we have to factorize. It means it's in step number 2, where we have to factorize, because our equation is equal to 0 then. Then there is no need for us to expand here. The misconception here is most of the learners will try to multiply 3x with 2x, 3x with negative 3, of which is wrong. We don't have to multiply here. Our equation is already factorized. What we need to do is to apply the zero factor rule. How do we apply the zero factor rule? We are going to say 3x minus 1 is equal to 0, or we can have 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. Then when you are done with your zero factor rule, then we can go to step number 4, where we solve our linear equations. Then we're going to start with this one by transposing negative 1 to the right hand side. As we transpose it, we're going to have 3x is equal to positive 1. Then we divide both sides by 3 because we want to make x the subject of the formula. It means this side x is going to be 1 over 3. When we're done with that one, we go to the second one. We still have to apply the very same method by transposing our 3, negative 3. Then we're going to have 2x is equal to positive 3. Then we divide both sides by 2 because we are getting rid of 2 to make x the subject of the formula. So in this side, x is going to be 3 over 2. The nice part about this question is that the minute you take these solutions and you substitute them where there is x in your question, you must get 0. That is the nice part about solving for x. You can always test your answers if you have done the correct thing. Out again. So now that's how we do our 1.2. And remember always that you must check the number that you have there. If it's equal to 0, it means you are good to go. Looking at the third one, 1.3, we are solving for x and you are given the equation. Open bracket, x plus 2, we close the bracket, and into negative x negative 3, close bracket, is equal to 6. So now, This is another misconception that learners will do, and they must avoid that at all costs. We said on the previous slide, if you can check, this equation is equal to 0. That's why we moved forward out to get. But looking at the second one now is equal to 6. Then we can use our zero factor rule now. We only use zero factor rule when our equation is equal to 0 with factors. Now, what we need to do here is to expand. That is the only time when you have to expand. When you are given a number, the equation that is equal to any number except 0. Then what we'll do now, we will use our FOIL method of multiplying by removing those brackets. As we remove the brackets, we are going to multiply. X multiplied by x is going to give you x squared. Correct? Then x multiplied by -3, you are going to get negative 3x. And in this form, learners must be able to multiply the signs. It's very important for learners to know how to multiply the signs so that we avoid making mistakes. Then we'll have positive 2 multiplied by x, which is going to give you positive 2x. Then positive 2 multiplied by -3. Remember, positive multiplied by negative is going to be negative. And then 2 times 3 is going to be what? It's going to be 6. Correct. Then you will have this equation equal to 6. Then now we have to simplify and transpose that 6 to the left-hand side. So we are going to have x squared. As we have x squared, remember, we have what we call the like terms there. Negative 3x plus 2. Those are the like terms. Then now you have to add the coefficient, which is negative 3 plus 2. If you say negative 3 plus 2, you are going to get negative 1x. Then negative 6, when we transpose the other one, is going to be negative 6. Then our equation is going to be x squared minus 1x minus 12 is equal to 0. Remember, I'm just writing 1x, but even if you leave it as negative x, it's still correct because we know that there is a ghost 1 there in front of x. There is a ghost 1. So now our equation is in a standard form and is equal to 0. Now we are good to go into factorizing our equation. As we factorize, remember you will open 2 brackets since you have your trinomial there. Then by factorizing, we're going to have x this side and x that side. We separated our x variables. Then from there, we look into our last term. The question that you need to ask yourself is, what are the factors that when you multiply, you can get 12, but when you add or subtract them, you get 1, correct? Before I speak with the signs, remember I'm talking about the numbers. The last number in the term and the one in the middle. So now we're going to have 4 or 6 multiplied by 2. 6 multiplied by 2 is a factor that will give you 12 when you multiply. But when you subtract or add those numbers, they don't give you 1. 6 times 2 is 12, 6 plus 2 is 8, 6 minus 2 is 4, of which it doesn't suit our factorization there. Then we can go to 3 times 4. If you say 3 times 4, 3 times 4 is 12, correct? And if you say 3 plus 4, you get 7. But if you say 3 minus or 4 minus 3, you get 1. Then 3 and 4, they suit our factorization. Then what I will do, I will just write 4 and 3. But now, another thing that you need to know is the signs. Where do you put the signs and how do you decide on which signs to use? We look into the sign of the last term. The sign of the last term is going to guide you on which sign must be there inside the brackets. So, if you can check the last term, the sign is negative. It means what is inside the bracket, the signs, I have to multiply them. And if you multiply two signs and you get negative, it's when you have positive multiplied by negative, or you have negative multiplied by positive, sorry. You have negative multiplied by positive. Then the outcome of those two signs, when you multiply them, they will give you negative. So it tells you that when the last term is negative, the numbers inside the bracket, one must either be positive and the other bracket must be negative. So we know that in the bracket we must have one positive, one negative. Then now, how do we decide which bracket must carry negative and which bracket must carry positive? We're looking into the sign of the middle term. The sign of the middle term there is -1, or is negative, not -1, but negative. Then we're saying between 4 and 3, the bigger number is 4. And we're saying the bigger number will carry the sign of the middle term. So if the middle term is negative and the bigger number between 3 and 4 is 4, then 4 will be negative and 3 will be positive. So those are the types of questions that you need to ask yourself when you are factorizing, to make sure that whatever you do is correct. Then now we are in step number 2. Step number 3, we know that we're going to apply our zero factor rule, or x plus 3 is equal to 0. Then we're saying x will be equal to 4, or your x is going to be equal to -3. Remember, I simply solved our linear equations there. So that's how you apply the types of factorization. There are so many questions that you need to ask yourself when you are factorizing for you to get the correct answers. Okay, done with 1.3. Going to your 1.4. 1.4, you can see that our question has so many things. It's not in the standard form and it has brackets. How to get? Then it's not difficult, good people. Don't look at this and become scared. You just need to apply the method that you know, and you will get the correct answers. But don't worry about getting the correct answers. The only thing that you need is to follow the correct method. If all learners can know how to follow the correct method, then everyone will be able to get into the final answer. How do we tackle this one? Remember, we have brackets. The only thing that we need to do is to remove the brackets. Why are we removing the bracket? Because our equation is not equal to 0, correct? And we can't factorize it like that. So now we have to multiply inside the brackets. We're going to have -3 multiplied by 3x, we are going to have -9x. Then -3 multiplied by 14. 3 multiplied by 14, you will take your calculator and multiply them. But I know that is going to give you your 42. Then it's equal to -6x squared. Our equation is not in the standard form. How do we put it in the standard form? I will take -6x squared and transpose it. And as you transpose it, it must be in a standard form. Remember, in the descending order of x, you start with x squared, x and a constant. So we're going to have positive 6x squared minus 9x minus 42, it's equal to 0. Then now our equation is equal to 0. Now we have bigger numbers that we can deal with, but you know that all the time you must check if ever you have the factor that you can multiply throughout, then you can work with smaller numbers. And when I'm looking at 6, 9, and 42, I know that the highest common factor that I can divide by there is 3. So if I divide here by 3, and I divide here by 3, and I divide this one by 3, and that one by 3. Remember, we're saying what we do on the right, what you do on the right, you also have to do on the left. So 3 goes into 6 2 times, and 3 goes into 9 3 times. Then 3 goes into 42 14 times, then it's equal to 0. Remember, sign doesn't change. The sign will only change when you're dividing with negative altogether. So now we have our standard form as 2x squared minus 3x minus 14 is equal to 0. Then what we do, we factorize. Remember, the factors of 2, guys, as you factorize, it's only 2 and 1. So 2 can go into one bracket, and the other one will only put x out together. Then from there we go to our third term, which is 14. Now we check the numbers that we multiply, they give you 14, and when you add or subtract them, they must give you 3. But what we have to bear in mind is that we have a number there as the leading coefficient. We have a number there as a leading coefficient. If ever you have to work with 7 and 2, they can work, but you must bear in mind that we are having a number there which is what? 2. And that number will multiply your factors. So, let me try this. Try and error. If I put 2 here and I put 7 here, because I said we can use 7 and 2 to get 14. Correct? If you're saying 2 multiplied by 7, you are going to get 14. And if you say 14 minus 2, you get 12. If you say 14 plus 2, you get 16. It means we don't get to our middle term. We don't get to our middle term. So now we can swap these factors. As we swap them, this side I will write 7 and this side I will write 2. Now let's test them if they can take us to our middle term. If you say 2 multiplied by 2, you are getting 4. If you say 7 multiplied by 1, you are getting 7. If you say 4 minus 7, then you are going to get 3, of which those are the 2 factors that we can work with. Those are the 2 factors that we can work with. So now I said the last term then, it is negative. If it's negative, the numbers, the signs that you can multiply and give you negative, it's only positive and negative. The middle term is negative, and the bigger number here, it's 7. The smaller number, it's 2. So I guess now you understand how I have done that, because in the previous activity, I have explained how you get them. Then now you know that you are going to use your zero factor rule. 2x minus 7 is equal to 0, or your x plus 2 is equal to 0. Now, you will have to simplify here. You will have 2x is equal to positive 7. You divide both sides by 2. Then x is going to be 7 over 2. Then with your x is going to be negative 2. So that is as simple as A, B, C. But learners need to know how to follow the correct method. That's it. Okay, let's move forward. The last one, it looks simple. We only have to put our equation into the standard form. Then now, remember, when you put it in the standard form, it must be x squared, x, and a constant. The question is 2x squared plus 2 is equal to 5. Then if I were to take this 5 and I transpose it, it must go straight in the middle. Then we're going to have 2x squared minus 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. Then from there we will have to factorize. As we factorize, we're going to have 2x and x. Remember, 2x and x, when you multiply them, they give you 2x squared. The factors of 2 that can give you 5. The factors of 2 is only 1 and 2. So with this one, I can put 2 here and I put 1 here. I know that 2 multiplied by 2 is going to be 4, and then 1 multiplied by x, you are going to have 1, of which 4 plus 1 is 5. But now, look into the last term sign. The last term sign is positive. And for you to get positive, it's if you have to multiply positive multiplied by positive is equal to positive, or negative multiplied by negative is equal to positive. So that's how you choose the signs. But now we're looking into the middle term. The middle term, the sign there is negative. So the only signs that I can choose is negative and negative inside the bracket. So I'll have negative 1 and negative 2. Then we have to use our zero factor rule there. Negative 2 is equal to 0. Then x is equal to 2. Then this side we're going to have 2x is equal to 1. Then you divide both sides by 2. Therefore, your x is going to be 1 over 2. 2 will cancel 2 there. So this is how we solve our equations. This is how you solve for x. It's as easy as A, B, and C. Okay, we now move to another questions that they can ask of quadratic equations. Now we're looking into solving quadratic equations containing fractions. Now we have to look into fractions, and we know that most of our learners, they are having challenges working with fractions, but we will try and simplify it to see that working with fractions is actually the easiest. But you need to follow these 4 steps to get your question right. The first one, it says you must get rid of the denominator or denominators by multiplying with the denominator throughout. Correct. So what it means here, it says the step 1, if ever I have x all over 2 is equal to 1. You must get rid of denominator but multiplying by denominator. It means I will multiply this side by 2 and I multiply this side by 2. Knowing very well that these 2 will cancel that one, then I will remain with x is equal to 2. That's what they mean about multiplying by the denominator. Remember, the denominator in a fraction is at the bottom and the numerator is on top. So now that's how that's what we mean actually. Then step 2, we rewrite the quadratic equation into the standard form. Correct? Then step 3, we factorize, and step number 4, we use our zero factor rule. Then we solve our equations. So those are the 4 basic steps that all learners must know and understand for them to solve quadratic equations containing fractions. Okay, looking into our activity number 2. Activity number 2, good people, we have to solve for x. And you can see that almost all the questions there, they have what? Fractions. But we know that the technique is to multiply everything by the denominator. Okay, let's look at the first one without any waste of time. We have x plus 2 is equal to 28 over x minus 1. How do we then solve this one? Remember, they said we have to multiply both sides by our denominator. And what is our denominator? Our denominator is x minus 1. So that's what I'm doing there. X minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1. Then, as you multiply by x minus 1, remember, x minus 1 will get rid of each other. Then this side, we have our 2 factors. So we can simply write it as x minus 1, x plus 2 is equal to 28. Then because this is not equal to 0, we have to expand our brackets. By expanding our bracket, x will multiply x will multiply 2. Negative 1 multiplied by x, negative 1 multiplied by 2. Then we're going to have x squared plus 2x. X multiplied by 1 is negative x. Negative multiplied by positive is negative 2. It's equal to 28. Then we'll transpose this 28 to the left-hand side. Then we're going to have x squared. 2 minus 1 is 1, correct? I write it as x. Then we have negative 2 negative 28 is equal to 0. Then from there we can factorize. Remember, before we even factorize, we have to write x squared plus x minus 30 is equal to 0. When you're saying minus 30, remember we're looking at negative 2 and negative 28. They're giving you negative 30. Learners, please use your calculator here, because that's where most of the learners, they write or they add wrongly. Some will write 26, how to get. So we have to be able to add this thing correctly using our calculators. Then now we have a perfect standard form where now we can do what? We can factorize. We're going to share our values of x there. Then we're looking into the factors of 30, that when we multiply, they can give us 1. I mean, when we multiply, they give us 30. When we add or subtract them, they give us 1. There are so many factors that when you multiply, they can give you 30. But when you add and subtract them, they might not give you 1. Looking into 15 multiplied by 2. 15 multiplied by 2 gives you 30, yes? But when you're saying 15 minus 2, you get 13. Or 15 plus 2, you get 17. 15 and 2, they are out. 10 times 3, 10 times 3, when you multiply them, they give you 30. But if you say 10 minus 3, you get 7. And when you're saying 10 plus 3, you get 13. Then it means 10 and 3, they are also out. Now we go to 6 and 5. If you say 6 times 5, it does give you 30. And if you say 6 plus 5, you get 11. But when you're saying 6 minus 5, you get 1. Then the factors that we can use there is 6 and 5. So do you see how we ask ourselves questions and how do we get these factors? You don't just write two numbers that are giving you 30 and then they are your factors. No. Those numbers, they must speak to the last term and the middle term altogether. Then now we can choose our signs. Remember I said if your sign of the last term is negative, the signs inside the bracket, one must be positive and the other one must be negative. And the middle term is positive. It means the bigger number between 5 and 6 is going to carry the sign of the middle term. So that's how we factorize. Then here you will have x plus 6 or x minus 5 is equal to 0. Then x is going to be negative 6 or x is going to be positive 5. So that's how simple you work these things out. So look at your question and then have a technique of how are you going to answer that type of a question. Okay, looking into the second one, here we have two fractions both sides. And remember, we can either multiply by the denominators both sides or we can cross multiply, because whatever method or technique we are going to apply here, by multiplying both sides by the denominators or cross multiplying, they are going to take us to the same equation. So now we will opt to cross multiply. If you cross multiply, you're going to have 2x minus 1. Remember, you multiplied with x minus 1. You will have x minus 2 into x plus 7. So after cross multiplying, you can see that you will have to multiply your brackets altogether. By multiplying your bracket, you apply the very same method of FOIL. So remember guys, by me showing you which numbers to multiply, I make it simple for you to see how did we arrive at that particular answer after removing the brackets. So 2x multiplied by x, you are going to have 2x squared. 2x multiplied by negative 1, you'll get negative 2x. Then your negative 1 multiplied by x is negative x. negative 1 multiplied by negative 1 is positive 1. Then on the other side, we're going to have x squared plus 7x minus 2x minus 14. Because 7 multiplied by 2, you will get your 14 there. You will get minus 14. Minus 14, minus 14. Then from there, you will have to add the like terms. You will have 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. It's equal to, remember, x and x, they are the like terms, and negative 2 and negative 1, they give you negative 3. Then x squared, 7 minus 2, because these are the like terms, you will get positive 5 minus 14. Then now I can decide to take everything that is this side to transpose it to your left-hand side. Then I only have 2x squared minus x squared minus 3x minus 5x plus 1 plus 14 is equal to 0. So you can see that I paired these terms according to their degrees of x. Correct. So now we're going to have x squared minus 8x plus 15 is equal to 0. Correct. Then now we will have to look into the factorization there. Correct? Now we'll have to look into our factorization. Then now we have x squared minus 8x plus 15 is equal to 0. Then we have to factorize it. It means we must open two brackets there. And we have to check. After I've separated my x there, you will have to ask yourself, which numbers that when I multiply, they can give me 15. When I add or subtract them, they give me 8. Those numbers are simply 3 and 5. If you say 3 times 5, you will get 15. If you say 3 plus 5, you will get 8. Then now, the sign of the last term is positive, but the sign of the middle term is what? It's negative. So it's only when you multiply negative and negative, you get positive. And negative 3 and negative 5, they will give you negative 8. So now that's as simple as ABC. That's how you will actually solve your equations. Then x is going to be positive 3, x is going to be positive 5. So those are the basic steps that you need to follow factorizing your fractions. Very easy when you're dealing with fractions, but you need to know how to get rid of your denominators. Looking into the third one, here we have negative x is equal to 6 all over x plus 1 minus 6. So you can see that we need to get rid of our denominator. And getting rid of the denominator is multiplying throughout by what? But what is in the denominator? Then we're going to have x, negative x, then you multiply it by what? By x plus 1. It's equal to 6 into x plus 1, then you still multiply it by x plus 1, correct? Then you will have negative 6 and you still multiply it by what? X plus 1. So that is as simple as ABC. That is how you are going to get rid of the denominator. Then now, those ones will cancel each other. With this x, you multiply it inside the bracket, and that negative 6, you multiply it inside the bracket as well. So negative x multiplied by x is going to give you negative x squared. Negative x multiplied by 1 is going to give you negative x. It's equal to 6. because now that's what you are left with, correct? Then now, moving forward, negative 6 multiplied by x is negative 6x, and negative 6 multiplied by 1 is going to be negative 6. So what I'm going to have here is negative x squared minus x. Those are not the like terms. We can't add them. Then on the right-hand side, you see that positive 6 and negative 6 are going to cancel out. Then you'll only be remaining with negative 6x. And this negative 6x, I will only transpose it to your left-hand side. Remember, we have to equate to 0. That is our aim. Then we're going to have negative x squared minus x plus 6x is equal to 0. Remember, when it changes when it crosses the equal sign, it changes the sign. Then now we're going to have negative x squared minus 1 plus 6, we are going to have plus 5x is equal to 0. You can see that there we have only 2 terms. And as we have 2 terms, the only thing that we can do there is to take out the common factor of x, like our first examples that we have done in activity number 1. Then we're going to have what? We're going to have x into negative x plus 5 is equal to 0. Then 0 factor rule, x is equal to 0, or negative x is equal to, negative x plus 5. Negative x plus 5 is equal to 0. Then we're going to say negative x is equal to negative 5. Our x must be positive, then we divide both sides by negative 1. Then x is going to be positive 5. So that is how easy we solve this type of the equation. Remember, dealing with fractions is not difficult. The only way is the technique that you need to use for you to get into that. How to get. So now we look into activity number 2, 1.4, which is the last sub-question in activity number 2. Then here you can see that on your right-hand side, you have 2 fractions. Then you ask yourself, how am I going to work with those 2 fractions? Remember, good people, from grade 7, grade 8, 9, and 10, we were learning how to add 2 fractions or how to subtract the fractions. If I have fractions like these ones, the only thing that, let me just make another number, let's say 5, yeah, so that the base don't have the same common multiple. So now we will have to say 2 multiplied by 5. That is the only thing or the correct step to follow when you're adding the fractions without even using a calculator. Then this is the technique that we have to use here. We multiply the base, then from there we will say you cross multiply. You will say how many times does 2 goes into 10? 2 goes into 10 how many times? 5 times. Plus, how many times does 5 go into 10? When I say 10, it means the base, if I multiply 5 times 10, 5 times 2 is 10. Correct. So we're going to have 2 like that. So that's how you are going to add. Then your answer is going to be 11 over 10. You can use a calculator to check. This is the basic method of dealing with fractions. And if you know this technique from lower grade, even in grade 11, grade 12, you can still apply this type of a method. The only thing that we know here is that we are having variables. The only thing that you know here is that we are having variables. By variables, I mean our equation is containing x values. So that is the only thing that maybe it will confuse our learners. But we have to take it step by step and practice more questions on this. Then we'll get it right. So like I said, that we're going to multiply our denominators, correct? then we'll have 1, then x go into x multiply by 4x, we cross multiply. We're going to have 1 into x plus 4, and on the other side we're going to have plus 5. Then when you cross multiply is multiplied by x. So do you see that now we have combined our fractions? Then as we simplify them, you will multiply inside by 1 and 5 will multiply them. Then we're going to have x plus 4 plus 5x all over. When I multiply my denominator, I will have x squared plus 4x is equal to 2. Remember that 2 is always divided by 1 if ever I want to cross multiply. If I don't want to cross multiply, then I can multiply both sides by what? By x squared plus 4x. Correct? Also this side I will multiply by x squared plus 4x. Correct. Why? Because this one will cancel that one there. You see how it works? Then it means now I will only have what? I will only have x plus 4 plus 5x is equal to 2 into x squared plus 4x. We have removed our fractions. It was as easy as A, B, and C. Now we add. The like terms on your left-hand side is x and 5x. So we're going to have 6x plus 4. On the right-hand side, you are going to multiply inside your bracket by 2, which is going to be 2x squared plus 8x. Correct? Then now, working with that, we take everything on the left-hand side, we can transpose it to the right-hand side. Then we're going to have 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 8x minus 6x minus 4. Correct? Then we're going to have 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. Then now let's have an extra space so that we can see. Remember our equation now is 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. Correct? So we have 0 is equal to 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. Double check if we have written it correctly. Correct. Then now we have to factorize them. How do we then factorize? We're going to have 2x and we're going to have x there. And the factors of 4 that can give you 2, we know that we're going to have your 2 and 2. Now in this case, if you check, you multiply 2 and 2 is going to give you 4. And then you have 2 times 1, which is going to give you 2. 4 minus 2 is going to give you 2. So the only sign that we can put here is to choose positive here and negative here. Then we're going to have 0 factor rule. 0 is equal to 2x minus 2, or 0 is equal to x plus 2. Then from there we can take this one this side. We're going to have negative 2x. It's equal to negative 2. Also this side we're going to have negative x. It's equal to 2. Correct? Then we divide here by negative 2. We divide by negative 2. Negative 2 cancel negative 2. X is equal to 1. So here we divide by negative 1. Negative 1 cancel that. Then we're going to have negative 2. So those are the steps that we need to follow when we are dealing with this type of the equation. Remember, it starts in these slides. Correct. So these are the basic things that you need to do for you to get rid of these fractions. The method that you have applied in the lower grade, they're very important when you have to deal with this. The only thing that we have done here is to add the variables. So that is how you solve this type of equation. Okay, moving forward, now we are looking into our quadratic equations, and then now we're focusing on how to use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula, you can see it's given there by x is equal to minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You need to identify this quadratic formula correctly. When I say you need to identify it correctly, we know that in technical maths, you are going to be given a formula sheet in your exams or test. So in the exam, the formula is written in full like that. And please rewrite the formula in full. When you're looking at step number 1, the first step, yes, is to write our formula or our equation, in the standard form. From the standard form, you need to be able to identify the value of A, the value of B, and the value of C in your equation there. You identify them. That is step number 2. After identifying them, you substitute the value of A, B, and C in your formula. Where there is B, you substitute the value of B. C, you substitute the value of C. And A, you substitute the value of A. Correct. So in this case, you can see that A here is equal to 6. And then B is negative 17, your B. Your B is negative 17 and your C is 12. Remember, you take it with the sign. You take it with the sign. You don't say 17. Your B is negative 17. Then from there, you can use your calculator to get your x values. Now, let's look at our activity number 3 then. So in activity number 3, we have x squared plus x is equal to 20. That is the first sub-question, and then all other sub-questions there. So without any waste of time, let's look into our question 1. Remember, you have to ask yourself, the first step they said this equation must be written in a standard form. But you can see that our equation is not in a standard form. The first thing that we will do is to get or convert our equation into the standard form. X squared plus x minus 20 is equal to 0. This one, we can factorize it, but the question says we must use the quadratic formula. As we use the quadratic formula, then we have to identify the value of what? A, the value of what? B, and the value of what? C. The value of A, the value in front of x squared is the ghost 1. The value in front of x is 1. And the constant is negative 20. Correct. Then using our quadratic formula, this is what I will have. Minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac minus 4ac all over 2a. Check how I've written my quadratic formula. I've written it the way you will see it in the question. Remember, the square root must cover everything. The division sign must start from negative b up until the end of the expression there at c. So what we see is learners writing the square root like that, the division sign like that. If you were to write this quadratic formula the way you see it, it means you have copied it wrong from the formula sheet. Because from the formula sheet, it will tell you that this division sign and this square root sign, they must cover all the variables there. So we need to do the proper things that when we are writing, learners. Now we're going to have x is equal to, we substitute. As we substitute, you remember you always substitute inside the bracket. You always substitute inside the bracket. You always substitute inside the the bracket. So I'm writing it like that so that you know that you also always substitute inside the bracket. So the value of b, which is 1 is going to go there and there. Those are the values of b. The value of a is also 1. Where there is supposed to be a, you put 1. The value of c is -20. Then we put -20 there. Then the value of a is 1 again. Then from there, what you do, you write the x like that. Then now we go and check with your calculator. When you punch your calculator, good people, please check the types of calculators that you use. And you must be able to write your quadratic or punch your quadratic equation in terms of how it's given there. The only thing that you have to know when you punch into your calculator is when you have to deal with these two signs here. You can't punch plus minus on a calculator. You'll only have to start with what? With positive. Then if you substitute your 1 as b, you substitute 1, then you substitute 1 again, you substitute 1 at a, and -20 at c, and also 1 at the bottom there. The first answer that you're going to get is positive 4. Then you go to the middle here. Now you remove positive, you put what? Negative. With your calculator. With your calculator. Then you go there and you you remove your positive, you put a negative. Then the other one is going to be -5. So those are the basic things that you need to understand when you're using quadratic formula. Those are two basic things that you need to get. And even if when you factorize this, you can see that the factors are correct. So this is another form of solving for x without factorizing but using a quadratic formula. Then let's go to the second one. The second one, you can see that our equation is not in the standard form. For you to put it in the standard form, you're going to have x squared plus 3x minus 5 is equal to 0. Then you know that your a is 2, your b is 3, and your c is -5. Your c is -5. Then using quadratic formula, you're going to have x minus, x is equal to, minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that's how it looks like. Remember, I've written it in this, but in this case, I just showed with the bracket. We know that b is what? B is 3. You must have 3 as b and 3 as b. Where there's supposed to be a, we put 2. Where it's supposed to be c, we put -5. Where it's supposed to be a, we put 2. Then that's where now you will be able to solve for your x variables. Remember, it's key to always remember this, that in your calculator, you will forever start with what? You will forever start with negative. So if you say negative into 3 plus the square root of 3 squared minus the square minus 4 into 2 and -5. Then at the bottom there's going to be 2 multiplied by 2. Then the first factor that we get here is 1. Then when you are done, we go and change our sign there from negative to positive, or from positive to negative. Then the other one, we're going to have -5 over 2. So that's how we use our quadratic formula. Remember, these ones, you can still factorize them, but you can also still use your quadratic formula. Are we together? Then now we move forward. We have your x, 7x squared plus 8x is equal to 0. But when they say we must use a quadratic formula, remember you must have 3 terms. You must have 3 terms. It means you will have the third number on a term as 0. Constant is 0. Then your A is going to be 7. Then your B is going to be 8. And your C is going to be what? 0. Then when you use your quadratic formula, you're going to have 7 plus minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 into, no, not 7, sorry, is 8. B is 8. B is 8. 8, then 7, correct? Then you'll have your 0 and 2 into 7. So you'll have 0 there and you have 7 there. Then you will have to punch in your calculator. You must look into your signs. You emphasize that thing of the signs. You can't put plus minus there. So you will have 8 SB, then you will have 8 squared, then you will have negative 4 multiplied by 7, and also 0, then you will have 2 into 7. Then the first one that you get there is going to be 0, and the second one that you get there is going to be negative 8 over 7. So that's how you can solve that using a quadratic formula. Correct? Then now, looking at the fourth one, there you can see that we have to remove the bracket first. And it's simple for us to remove the bracket because we have dealt with that in so many cases. You will have 4x squared minus 4x is equal to 3x squared. 3x squared. So in this case, you can see that we don't have like terms there. Then we can take this one and transpose it. Or you can have to transpose this 3 to the left-hand side. We're going to have 4x squared minus 3x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. Then the two factors that are, the two terms that are the like terms, we're going to have 1x squared minus 4x plus 0 is equal to 0. Remember, we don't have the last term there. So we're going to put it as 0. Then A is going to be 1, B is going to be minus 4, and C is going to be 0. You can see that I take these numbers together with their signs. Then we're going to have x is equal to minus into our b is minus 4 plus minus the square root of minus 4 squared minus 4 into 1 and 0 all over 2 into 1. Then the values of x, you can substitute them there. Then how you do this one, we are going to say negative into negative 4, then plus negative 4 there, then negative 4 squared, and you have negative 4 into 1 and 0, then you divide it by 2 into 1. Then the first one then you will get 4. And then now when you check the second one, you will have 0. So that is how you use your quadratic equations or the quadratic formula. Correct. So now we go to activity number 4, but with activity number 4, we have the quadratic equations that you can factorize. So that's where now the real quadratic formula needs to work. You have to use quadratic formula here because here you can factorize this type of quotients. That's why the quotient says you must correct to 2 decimal place. It means as you punch in your quadratic equation, you will never find the factors that you can easily factorize in this type of equations. Hence, we said correct to 2 decimal place. Then, without any waste of time, let's go to the first one. Remember, with the first one there, we have x squared, 3x squared minus 15x is equal to, here it's supposed to be negative 5. Yes, it's supposed to be negative 5. Okay, so we can fix that one. And moving forward, you will have to say 3x squared. As we transpose this thing, it's going to be positive 5x minus 15 is equal to 0. Then we know that a is equal to 3, b is equal to 5, c is equal to negative 15. Then substituting into your quadratic formula, we're going to have x is equal to, remember there is negative of the formula, and then b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4 into a and c all over 2 into a. What is our b? It's 5. What is our b? It's 5. What is our c? A is 3. C is negative 15. And a is 3. So that's how you punch it in your calculator. And we get your values of x. Then, having that, we're going to have negative into 5 plus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 into 3 and negative 15 all over 2 into 3. Then you will see that your answer here is going to be 1,55. Then you change your sign from positive to negative. Then the other side is going to be negative 3,22. So now you see that we have met our objectives of writing our answer in 2 decimal place altogether. So you must also have to know how to convert or how to round off to 2 decimal place. That is another thing that we need to put in mind. Okay, looking into the second one there, you can see that our equation is not in the standard form. For you to put it in the standard form, we are going to have 4x squared minus 16x minus 2 is equal to 0. So in this term, we know that a is equal to 4, b is equal to minus 16, and c is equal to minus 2. Then we use our quadratic formula. We have b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, then all over 2a. Our b is negative 16, b is negative 16, a is 4, and c is negative 2, all over a as 4. Then we have to punch this into our calculator. Then you will have negative 16 plus the square root of negative 16 squared. Then you will have negative 4 into 4, and your c is going to be negative 2. Then your a is going to be 4. So if you punch that in your calculator, here we're going to have 4,12. Then you substitute, you change your sign from positive to negative. Remember, that's where you change your sign in your calculator. Then the other one is going to be negative 0,12. So those are the two answers that you are going to get using quadratic formula. So we look into the third one. So remember, it's not in the standard form. So we have to transpose this one to the left-hand side. Then we're going to have positive 2x squared minus 4x plus 1 is equal to 0. That's how we are going to write it. Then we're going to have a as 2, b as minus 4, and you see as 1. Correct? Then we're going to have our quadratic formula, which is negative 4 plus minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 into 2 and 1 as c all over 2 into 2. Then you'll get your x values there. So you will simply punch in those variables, or those numbers into your quadratic formula. You punch them into your quadratic formula the way you see them, then you will never go wrong. So as you punch them in your calculator, the first one we are going to have 1,71. Remember, we correct into 2 decimal place. And the second one, we are going to have 0,29. So those are the two values that we're going to get there. Remember, you must punch your quadratic equation properly, guys, so that we can get the correct answers. The last one, it can seem a little bit difficult, but it's not difficult. We have dealt with fractions. It means here what we need to do is to get rid of 2. How do I get rid of 2? We agreed that we will multiply everything by 2. Then 2 will cancel 2, then I will have x squared is equal to, I will multiply by these 2 inside, then 5 times 2 is going to be 10x, and 17 times 2. If you say 17 times 2, we are going to get plus 34. Then now we just have to take this one and transpose it, which is going to be x squared minus 10x minus 34. It's equal to 0. Then now you can see that your a is 1, your b is negative 10, and your c is negative 34. Then now we go into your quadratic equation. Then we're going to have negative into negative 10 plus minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 into 1 and negative 34 all over 2 into 1. Correct. So now, as you punch this in your calculator, let's see what we get. If you say negative 10 plus the square root of negative 10 into 1 and multiplied by negative 34 all over 1. The first one, we're going to get x as 12,68, or the other value of x is going to be negative 2,68. So that's how we use the quadratic formula when we can factorize our equations. Remember, there are no factors that you multiply, they give you 34. And you add or subtract them, they give you -10. There are no factors like that. So we have to use the quadratic formula to get those types of factors. Are we together? Then this is the end of the lesson. I hope you have enjoyed your lesson. Remember, we learn by repetition. It means you must go through this lesson again and practice more the techniques of solving the quadratic equations. I thank you.